This week on Off the Air, Michael Nastri.
I am Andrew Posadas, pleased to be joined alongside Alexander Wolz for this episode. And I am pleased to join in an associate producer, associate director right now at CBS Sports Network, was at Fordham University from 2005 to 2009, and spent a whole lot of time at WFUV. Mike Nastri. Mike, welcome into Off the Air.
Hey guys, glad to be here. Really happy to be joining you and excited to speak with you guys.
So Mike, let's just get started with you growing up. When did you first get that bug or that inclination that you wanted to do something in the sports media industry growing up?
I had the fortune of my dad being in the industry. He was an audio engineer for sports and entertainment. When you take your son to work day would be a little different than going to an office like most people growing up. And I definitely had the opportunity to be in the trucks, in the production rooms, and in the control rooms, and getting an idea of what it was like to be in a live TV atmosphere. And actually, heading into Fordham, I wasn't quite sure that that's what I wanted to do, but then being at FUV and the love and passion that I have for sports, and then the love and passion that I found with radio and TV production while at Fordham, it was an easy career choice for me leaving Fordham in 2009.
So you talk about having that interest in production from being really young. You get your first days at Fordham. When you first come into FUV, first come into the station, what were those first days like for you?
It's definitely a strange experience because it's not like it's a bunch of students. Obviously the station as a whole is a full-time or mostly full-time music station. And at the time when we were there was a small sports department and a small news department. And then the Kale and the Gale guys, which actually was my freshman roommate, was the host for junior and senior year. And that was kind of the extent of the student participation at the station. And, you just didn't, you walk in and you meet Bob for the first time in the back office. And it was definitely an interesting experience, but you immediately felt welcome. Everybody at the station is incredibly friendly and helpful, and wanted to see the students that were working at the station succeed. With that, on that softer note, I heard about the passing of Rita Houston today, and it was unfortunate. Like, she was one of the people that just had such an infectious energy in the office, and the few times that our paths crossed at the station were memories that I'll never forget, just because of what a wonderful, expressive individualist that she was. And the station and the music community is going to be sorely missing her.
Yeah, our condolences go out to Rita's family and her friends. It's definitely a tragic news hearing that out of FUV. But Mike, you also mentioned another name, Bob, and that is short for Bob Aarons. Can you just talk to us about your first interaction with Bob and how he really helped you get acclimated into the sports department at FUV?
Yeah, Bob was very interested that my dad had a technical background. So that was definitely the first introduction that Bob and I had. Leaning back in his office chair as I sat in the opposite in the tiny cluttered office in the back of FUV was very interesting. And the thing that Bob has continued to instill in me and the rest of my classmates that were at FUV is just the never-ending battle to get things as perfect as possible. And I think he would sit there and even from training when we were learning how to cut highlights for football games or do the newscasts early on, and just be shadowing whoever was doing them and doing practice newscasts on the side. You felt like it was good when you left the booth, and then he would come in and critique a little bit more and critique a little bit more. And that's what the world's like. You're going to have bosses in production or any facet that you go into that, production is such a subjective and opinionated industry that you're always going to have people that see something different. And being able to take that constructive criticism and make your piece better or your performance better is something that has helped me so much in my career now. And it's something that Bob kind of kept with with my foundation at Fordham and FUV.
So we've heard a lot of those similar stories about people that think they're the best play-by-play broadcaster, and Bob kind of gives them that wake-up call when they're doing a demo. What was one of those moments like for you, maybe on the production side, something that you might have been doing that maybe Bob stepped in and said, hey, this is a better way to do it, and you kind of learned from that specific experience maybe?
There was probably quite a lot, and Bob and I always had a great relationship, but it would be definitely a little bit back and forth. Where I wasn't afraid to bite back a little bit at Bob if he was driving us crazy at 11:30 on one fade out for a piece that we were working on. But Dan Obermuller, who's also working at CBS Sports right now as a broadcast associate, and I were covering the MLB Fan Fest, which was during All-Star Weekend in 2008 when it was at Yankee Stadium. And so it was the 4 baseball beat reporters, and Lou Baricelli and I believe it was Bobby Coyle, but I'm not positive at the time, were covering what was going on at the park. But at the same time at the Javits Center, there were all Hall of Fame or Hall of Fame caliber players that were doing different book signings or memorabilia signings at the Javits Center for Fan Fest. And Dan and I ended up putting together a piece on the Fan Fest, doing all the interviews with ex-players and really legends of the game. And I remember we were there until 1 o'clock in the morning one night before we needed to finish, and it was just a never-ending battle of back and forths over which bite should go where, and this VO didn't sound great, and we should really have him do this again. And, again, we fought with him at the time, but then looking back on it, he was right. And the piece ended up, I believe, winning a New York State Broadcasters, I think, second place award for the piece. So it obviously came out really well in the end. And that was because Bob continued to push us. This can be better. This can be better. This can be better.
Yeah, I mean, everyone always says Bob knows best at the end of the day, from alums that we've heard while Bob Aarons was here at FUV. But Mike, for yourself personally, do you remember the point where you decided that you wanted to go into production more so than be on air?
I mean, that really, I think, happened after college. I did a little bit of both while I was at FUV. And I think it's really important to be able to get both sides, because being an on-air talent at FUV at times, whether it was doing color for basketball or soccer, or being one of the hosts for one-on-one, and having the producer talk to you then, and knowing, okay, well, that wasn't a great time to be talking to me because I'm not as smooth on air as maybe like a Ryan Rucco or a Justin Shackle that can kind of just roll with the punches. And it helped me kind of get into that mold, knowing what on-air talent needs, and it helped me become a better producer later on. So having that experience set me up for, again, success down the road. After college, senior year, I actually did put some demo reels together, and it was the only job bites were coming from, Fargo, North Dakota, or, something like that, where I would even get a response from people. And it dawned on me that I would have to be leaving really like my circle of friends and family in the New York area to continue down that path. And I think at the time I saw that I had some potential with some of the pieces that I worked on at FUV to be able to do some longer form features and production in that sense. And it got me going in a production field. My senior year at Fordham, I worked at the station and did some on-air stuff, but a majority of my time was spent as a production assistant at MSG while I was still in school. And that got me started on a path there, working for their high school sports network, MSG Varsity, when it first launched for a couple years before then coming to CBS Sports and CBS Sports Network in 2011. And I've been there ever since.
An interesting point that you brought up there was about the importance of being in New York. You talked about how you didn't want to take a job that would bring you to a kind of a different place. Why has that been so important to you? Kind of working with MSG as one example, now at CBS Sports Network, and kind of being at Fordham as a student, but now also, working with CBS. Why has it been so important to stay here in New York?
I mean, I think for me, it was just being around friends and family and not wanting to miss those opportunities. We had a lot of on-air talent that had varying degrees of success come and visit us from their experience at FUV. And for me, I didn't want to get stuck in a place that I was going to maybe be unhappy being for a while. And not to say, and to be honest with you, I've been to Fargo, North Dakota a few times now covering college hockey. And it's a wonderful town. It's a great place. So at the time, maybe it was a little immaturity or, for lack of a better term, FOMO, fear of missing out with family and friends. But I'm very happy with the decision that I made to stick with production. I think it was a field that I was going to excel more in than being on air.
Yeah, and Mike, you mentioned the professional atmosphere that FUV has at Fordham, as opposed to other, prominent college radio stations. How do you think working in that environment helped you transition to working for a big company like MSG and then moving up to CBS Sports Network? How do you think FUV played a part in you kind of making a smooth transition going out into the career field?
I mean, when I was in college, if you said that you were working at FUV, it gave you immediate credibility with everyone, whether it was the major league teams in the area from the 5 major sports leagues in New York, 6 major sports leagues that we had in New York, or if it was the production networks that were in the area, or even on a national scale. At that time, we had guys or gals that were interning at SNY, CBS, ESPN, and then all of the major sports teams in the area, and being able to go and cover them. I was the Rangers beat reporter for 3 years. I was the Red Bulls beat reporter for 2 years. Then the Mets during the summer of my junior year into the fall of my senior year. Having those experiences and making contacts at those games and being a familiar face to people, then when you then start your career in the field, whether it's on air or production, you're someone that's familiar. People know that you're respectful. People know that you are doing your homework and you're hardworking, and you're not going to be someone that's immature in the situation. And I think that was a huge help and a huge credibility boost, leaving the university and into any job perspective that I had, at that time. And obviously it was a tough job market graduating in that window, between with the guys that I was with from 08 to 10 or 11, similar to how it could be right now. So, but that gave me a leg up and gave me the work ethic and the background and the tools to succeed moving forward. And I hit the ground running and really haven't stopped since.
So you mentioned it kind of throughout, some of those names and people that you were with at FUV. You said Ryan Ruocco, Justin Shackle, and some other people. So who were some of those maybe significant people that you kind of remember being with, going on road trips with, that you still stay in touch with today?
So, I mean, a group of us from that kind of 2-year window still go out to dinner with Bob every year around Christmas. I was roommates with Lou Baricelli for 2 years, who's a PR, super PR person for MLB Network now. I was really close with Lou. Remember just the camaraderie of that group was great. We would hang out together on weekends. We would hang out and grab dinners when we were together on the road. Ryan was a year older than I was, along with his roommate, Bobby, who graduated a little early. So they graduated at the same time. And then a year younger was Brian Clark. Justin Shackle was with my year. So it was just a great group of guys that all were talented and creative in their own ways, and now have all really left a mark on the sports industry, either local or on a more national scale.
So just following up on that, Mike, is there any broadcast that you've done, any game that you've reported on, whatever the case, any one-on-one interview or show? Is there any highlights in your time at FUV that you kind of think stands out more?
I mean, there's a lot of highlights that I can remember. The first was, when I joined the station as a sophomore. I actually started out as a Tulane student that moved in during Hurricane Katrina, and then ended up at Fordham, which was a school that I really wanted to go to, but just didn't get as much scholarship money to go there as I did to Fordham. Ended up going to Fordham for the semester, and I loved it so much I stayed. And then after I kind of had felt settled at Fordham, that's when I got involved with the station. And I remember the first year I was doing women's broadcast as the producer on, and then I was one of the hosts for the Kathy Andruzzi show, who was the coach at the time. And that started getting me thinking about what other sports we could be doing on the internet, because those at the time were only on WFUV.org. And I've been a soccer fan since I was 5 years old. I started playing, still play at a very recreational level now, but I found another guy with Brian Clark that was a huge soccer fan, and we went to the head coach of the Fordham team at the time, Jim McKeldry, and with Bob and pitch, hey, can we do some of these games, at least home games, on WFUV.org? Soccer is not something that's on the radio a ton. And it took us a while. We did almost a month of the season at home games, kind of prepping, practicing. And I remember the first time that we did a game, we actually went to Columbia, which was a Fordham away game. I think it was like a mini tournament. And we did 1 or 2 games from the press box at the Columbia football field. And just seeing something that you created with someone else, and then it was rough. I can guarantee you it was a rough broadcast. I was the analyst, and I was far from a finished product, and Brian was just starting his play-by-play duties. And we were doing a sport that we didn't have a lot of training in covering other than knowing the sport. But it was a great experience. And, I think it kind of opened up other people in the station trying to broadcast sports that they were really interested in covering throughout the years. We would always do a little softball or a little baseball, but I think it opened up to, I think at one time there was some water polo, some volleyball, FUV.org radio broadcast that went out. And I think it just opened up a lot of ideas to people that were working at the station that were a little younger than us, to how we can utilize the internet to continue the WFUV sports brand. And then the second is probably the thing that I'm most proud of at FUV was the 2-part interview I did with Fay Vincent, the former commissioner of baseball. It was an 1.5-hour interview that Fay and I did from Bob's office, actually, because it was the only tie line that was available when Fay can do it. And Bob was sitting there. I'd mute myself, and he would, Michael, ask him something, ask him this. And that's not the way, follow up with this, Michael. And, of course it made the interview better, like everything, as I alluded to earlier with Bob. But, that interview was something that I'll never forget. We covered topics that I never thought that a college student can get out of someone like the former commissioner of baseball. We talked a long time about the steroid era, which was one of the most important stories my junior and senior year with the Mitchell Report coming out. I was actually at the Mitchell Report release. I have somewhere one of the original Mitchell reports in my baseball card memorabilia, I think. And it was just electric being at one of the biggest sporting stories and at the center of it, and then talking to someone that had such an innate knowledge to how it worked and what they should have done and what they didn't do. He expressed a lot of regret to how he should have pushed the envelope with Bud a little bit, and Bud Selig a little bit more at the beginning of the steroid era in baseball. And it was one of the most memorable moments of my career still to this day. And it happened during my senior year at FUV.
That's fantastic. And I want to say, too, on the soccer note, I know Andrew and I are both soccer fans ourselves, so we can't thank you enough for getting that started at FUV.
Yes.
It's sticking with that today, so that definitely appreciate that. And one of the other things, you talk about doing some different things at the station and kind of going through that kind of a transitional time and starting a new sports. Another thing that was new, and Andrew and I were talking about this beforehand, was the TV station that they had at Fordham at the time. Now, this is not around anymore. It's something that we haven't been exposed to, but you did work at it, and now obviously spending time in TV with CBS. I'm curious what that kind of was like for you, obviously outside of the radio experience, and how that may have helped you in any particular way.
Yeah, it was a very, very old SD control room that had technologies that I think walking into the production offices at MSG, they were like, wow, that's what you guys are using in your college university. But it was, you know, it was meant for the library to do talks and whatnot. So it was very basic. Again, at that time, I don't think that the TV network and the radio station had a great relationship, or I shouldn't say that, I should say didn't have a relationship that was really working together a lot. And I was interested in doing more long form sports talk, highlighting Fordham University students. You know, so we would do kind of like a New York sports segment, and then the second segment we would do a long form interview with a great athlete that was at Fordham, but maybe not a basketball player or a football player. You know, we had all regional players in track and field and volleyball and soccer, and I thought that was a cool way to get involved. One of our other roommates with Lou was a guy named Gary Van Genderen, who was, his work study program was working at the studio. So he got to know the person that ran the studio and gained his trust. And we pitched the idea to him, and we started the show, The Sports Word. And we had some of the FUV guys come in, and we would both host together. But it was an interesting opportunity. Because again, it made you think a little differently to how the production was to go. You weren't just worried about sound, you were worried about lighting, and you were worried about, okay, we need to B-roll this interview because you don't want to just look at the three of us for 10 minutes. So it made you open your eyes to how much else there is in production, past just audio at times, and really helped you understand the visual concept. The thing that I've been a little disappointed for some of you guys is, and I know that you're really starting and really going down this route because it's important, is to bring in a video concept into FUV as much as possible, like you guys are doing here. I think today more than ever, everything is a mold of all kinds of media in one. It's pictures, it's in photos, it's audio, it's production, video production. And blending those in and being good and multifaceted and having experience in all of those is only going to broaden your horizons when you get out of college, and teach you and give you the tools to succeed across the board. You know, a lot of universities, I think to a certain degree, have caught up a little bit to Fordham on the video front, and the training that they'll never get is what we're getting at the radio station. And if you're able to bridge those two gaps together, you're going to, you know, Fordham's going to continue to be that unstoppable media landscape and producing talent both in on air and production across a number of different mediums.
Mike, the current pandemic has really drastically changed how sports networks are going about their broadcasts. We're seeing a lot of things done remotely. You know, announcers are at home, you know, in their basements doing games, calling it off of a monitor. For yourself as a producer and a director, what has been some of the biggest transitions, some of the biggest challenges that you have faced this year, but with the pandemic really starting back in March?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's affected production in a really profound way that it's going to be interesting to see, you know, what we do moving forward. You know, I was traveling a lot for games in the past, you know, going out, whether I was the AD on the game, which is associate director, I was doing the edit for the game, whether I was cutting a big tease for certain games, or, you know, rolling the commercials, you know, working with tape on tape packages, to directing, which is, you know, calling the camera shots and the overall aesthetic look of the broadcast. I was always kind of out on the road traveling a lot. Obviously travel has slowed down, and, you know, I've been very thankful to work for a company that's taken our safety and put it, you know, in the forefront, and, you know, has taken social distancing and testing, and all of that stuff is very, very important to people that are starting families, and makes you feel like it's a corporation that really cares about you. You know, the lack of travel has really been the biggest thing for me. We've been doing some games out of control rooms that are a little different than how we would normally do a game, but we've all adjusted well. And I think the name of the game is being as flexible as possible. And I think, you know, you have to be flexible in an ever-changing world. And it's something that, again, being at FUV kind of taught me, with all the different things that I had my hands in when I was at the station, to be able to manage and juggle a lot of things at once, but also be able to know that things aren't always going to go your way, and to roll with the punches and be flexible. And that flexibility and adaptability is something that is an incredible skill to have in any business that you go in moving forward.
And something that you mentioned too was a little bit about what the future might look like. And I think that's something that we're all kind of interested in now, as production's kind of gone remote broadcasting and doing things, like you said, from home or in control rooms that look a little different. What have you, in these past few months, what have you kind of taken away that you think might stick with that kind of future of sports from a production standpoint?
The short answer is I don't know. I think every media company, every production is going to take different things that they liked and didn't like from kind of being forced to adapt in this way. And I think moving forward, I think everyone's going to take a little bit of what they liked and a little bit of what they didn't like and instill it, you know. I don't want to be one to kind of project what a company as a whole is going to do, but one thing for me that I have found to be incredibly nice is being able to edit from home. You know, I think there's certain times that you're editing a piece that you really want to be next to your editor and having a consistent conversation with them. But the Zooms and the Google Meets and the video services now, where you can share a screen and have a second screen where you're looking at the person, it's not quite the same, but it's certainly, for certain things, can make it work. And I think it gives you some flexibility, is if your schedule's crazy or you're traveling to multiple games in a row, and maybe you have to edit something really quickly. It's a tool that you can use moving forward. Maybe not the norm, but certainly something that people are now all used to, and you can access to help you and complement the regular workflows that you had before.
Mike, one last question for you before we conclude this episode. What piece of advice, or what's the biggest piece of advice that you have for those of us who are working at FUV now, some of us who are just breaking into FUV at Fordham, and those incoming freshmen who are coming into Fordham and may be interested in working at FUV?
I think it's three things. I think it's embrace every opportunity that you can get at FUV, whether it's producing a women's basketball game and running the board, or being the host of one-on-one for a week. All of the experiences there are professional, a professional atmosphere that you're not going to get maybe even at an internship level, because you're not going to get the opportunity to do those jobs. You can walk in and dip your toe in a bunch of different fields and figure out what you like and what you want to concentrate on. With that too, because of the opportunities that you have at FUV to set up for an internship, intern at a bunch of different places in a bunch of different fields, intern in production, intern in programming, intern in operations. And you might find that you really like maybe not having to do with the creative part of the broadcast, but you might like being one of the people that down the road is selecting the programming that you're putting on the network. Maybe you decide that you don't like the television space at all and you want to do more podcasts. You know, there's so many different media jobs out there now, that way more than there were when I was applying to jobs out of school, that I think being able to have a understanding of a bunch of different skill sets, and from both FUV and internships, are going to be great. And I would say that for everyone that's at FUV, it's never going to hurt to embrace video. I think the younger generations are definitely doing that across the board just from their personal device. But now more than ever, you can be so creative with technology. You know, when I was in school, our smartphones were flip phones, So when you were trying to take video of someone, it was not a broadcast quality, but you could go and shoot something on your iPhone on campus and have it look great. So I think just being creative with the tools that technology have given us to play around and, just kind of do stuff on your own and see what you're capable of is incredibly important because it'll help you gain confidence, but it will also help you gain a knowledge base that'll be incredibly helpful if you want to go in any type of media career moving forward.
Couldn't agree more with that.
Yes, and on that note, he is an associate producer, associate director at CBS Sports Network. More importantly, he is an FUV sports alum. He is Michael Nastri. Mike, appreciate you taking some time to join us here on Off the Air.
Of course, guys. Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun. Appreciate it, and good luck with the rest of your careers at Fordham.
Thank you.